We're live.
Okay, welcome everybody. This is the Senate Education Committee. We're going after 2 on Tuesday the 20th. We are, last week we heard from the secretary putting forward, I think what was described as their best shot at a map, even a hybrid map that we got. And today we're going to get another map that was introduced to the task force by Senator Beck and I think former Secretary Law. And then what we really want to do this week, that's not entirely, not the whole week, but a lot throughout the week, is test book that's been put in front of us. We've got the Bs coming in, and we've got a number of superintendents coming in, all to just give us some reaction thoughts to put us in a position of figuring out how we're going forward. So, with that, we all have copies of Senator Beck's maps. I think it's in 3 versions, but I think that one you can all that you can say. Yeah. So, welcome, Senator Beck.
Okay, thank you for having me.
So, for the record,
Senator Scott Beck, Caledonia District's former House Education member. So the maps that you see in front of us were constructed by myself and David Wolk. And as the chair said, David has got a resume a mile long, Commissioner of Education, Superintendent, President of Castleton. It goes on and on and on. And I really enjoyed working with Dave. And so what David, as the task force progressed, there were a number of different ideas that we're talking about exploring, districts based on CTE, districts based on county, districts based on regional high schools, and there were a couple of others. And at various meetings, as we progressed through our 8-meeting sequence there, we were asked, county, a map based on county. Do we even want to proceed with that? Do we even want to look at it? Is it even going to be worth their time? And for example, counties, we decided, and when we just threw a kind of a thumbs up, thumbs down exercise, we gave it a thumbs down. The reason we gave it a thumbs down was because we just felt that so much had happened since the county lines were drawn that it just didn't really make sense anymore. And we did that, and we went through that same exercise with CTE. And CTE was, continuous thumbs up through the whole process. And so David and I continued to work on that proposal. In the end, at the very end, the task force decided by, I think it was 8-3 vote, to not recommend this set of maps as part of their greater task force report. Nevertheless, the map is still, it was part of the process, and it was looked at very closely. So just to kind of orient you to, what is going on here and what the
Senator, what should we be looking at?
I'm going to start with this one.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And so what David and I were trying to accomplish, and I think we did, was we were trying to really solve one, big problem. And that was to make it so that it would be very easy for every child, every student in Vermont to access a career and technical education center. Okay. And right now, I know you've had a lot of the discussions probably in this committee and also in Senator Ron Hinsdale's committee regarding CTE. But basically, I kind of put kids into 3 different buckets. Kids that are in school districts that have a career and technical education center, it's very easy for them to access that career and technical education center that school district operates. Okay. If you're a kid that has choice in the high school grades, public tuition student from a district that doesn't operate a high school, it's very easy to access a career and technical education center because in those situations, the money just follows the kids seamlessly. That's how it works, whether they go to a career and technical education center or not. The third type of student is a little bit, is really quite difficult, can be. And those are students that are from school districts or supervisory districts that do not operate a career and technical education center. And if that student decides to leave that district and travel to another district that has a career technical education center, then the sending district has to effectively, pull money out of its budget, and that money has to get sent to that receiving district. And that in some areas of the state, it is obviously dependent, but it can serve as an obstacle, deterrent to kids getting to career technical education center. So that last circumstance was what we were trying to solve when we did this map. And so what we did was we started with the Career and Technical Education Center Regional Advisory Board lines. We looked at the patterns of tuitioning that existed in the state, and we drew lines such that we thought that the towns that we populated to each of these governance units, that's where the kids were going anyhow. Knowing that we could make, I wouldn't say call it a mistake, but knowing that in the instance of a choice student, we didn't necessarily have to worry so much about that community because those kids can go wherever they want to anyhow. And so what we ended up with after we, massaged those lines and tried to account for a lot of things that have occurred since the regional advisory boards were established is what you see in front of you right here. Okay. And there's a couple of things I think in here that are interesting. And if you decide to, continue a conversation around these maps, you probably want to know about, be alerted to. One is that you'll notice that Grand Isle is its own supervisory district of about 850 kids, which is small compared to what a lot of people in the conversation are hypothesizing right now. And the reason we did that is we just didn't feel like some of those kids go to Franklin County, they come down into Chittenden County, they go to a number of different high schools down in Chittenden County, public high schools, and then some go over to New York. We did not feel like it would be in the best interest of those communities to populate them with either Franklin County or with Chittenden County. And that's why they're there, as alone as a very small district. Okay, that was our thinking. The other that you'll notice is that Chittenden County is a rather large district, right next to the very rather small district. And we had, it was an interesting conversation. We had reached out to the members of the task force that were from the Chittenden County area to, do you have a suggestion for how Chittenden County might be divided up? They did not offer any suggestions. And so, one train of thought is I was thinking of is like, one big district, 22,000 kids, 8 public high schools, the possibilities of intra-district choice in a situation like that, where a lot of these high schools are rather close to each other, might be a really good option for kids. The other thing that makes it really difficult from a CTE perspective to divide up Chittenden County is those 2 CTE centers are rather close to each other. So that's, that was kind of our thinking about Chittenden County and why we left it large. Is there a division that makes sense? There may very well be. David and I didn't think that we understood Chittenden County well enough to, propose something. And also, I think you all have already know this, but, every time you put a line on a map like this, the friction points increase. Fewer lines, fewer friction points, more lines, more friction points. I think another area that is interesting and might also require a little bit of thought if this committee decided to work with this map is Riverbend Career and Technical Education Center, which is on the other side of the state. I guess I'd call that magenta or something like that. And that is also a pretty small governance unit. I think it's about 2,000 kids. Currently, Thetford is attached to it. That OESU But it's not geographically connected because of the Rivendell School District, which does the two interstates are the ones that have the hash lines through the diagonal hash lines. So we took Thetford and we put it over with the Randolph area. That's a change. And then there was also a lot of conversations about, Riverbend is quite small. Part of it's in Caledonia County, part of it's in Orange County. Would it just make more sense to take Rivendell and to roll it into Caledonia or to roll it into Randolph? And so maybe that's something that you might want to consider as well. The map was drawn such a way, it was also one of the considerations that we took into account. It does not divide any existing school districts. So it doesn't take any existing school districts and break them up. We thought that would be, could be culturally very disruptive. It might be legally very disruptive too, because now you got split up assets and bank accounts and liabilities and everything else. So when we picked what we picked, we did it in such a way that we didn't break any school district lines. We did break some supervisory union lines, but not school district lines. Okay. So maybe before I proceed to the next map, are there anybody have any questions about this map? Yeah, there.
Did you look at the Grand Isle and what schools actually had choice? I mean, because that would affect if they were choiced out, that would affect the strength, the number of.
Yeah, so they're in a process right now, but the Grand Isle Supervisory Union right now is composed. I may be dating myself. They've gone through some transformation the last 6 to 12 months, but I think as I understand it right now, it's a supervisory union with 3 school districts in it. Alberg in the north is a pre-K through 8. The southern part of Grand Isle is a pre-K through 8, and the middle part is a pre-K through 6. So, but I think they were in the process of making everything a pre-K through 8. I'm not sure exactly where they are in that process, but all of them have high school choice. All the kids in that supervisory team have high school choice. Yeah.
I think it's still, you were on the task force. It would help me to understand, to what end. I think you're a CTE instructor. Like, I've been frustrated.
No.
Oh, you're not?
No.
Oh, but you're at the comprehensive CTE.
I'm right. The school I teach
Okay.
has a
But what do you teach?
I teach history.
Oh, okay. Great. It's been frustrating to be talking about CTE maps without a lot of focus on how do we really help kids access CTE, and do these maps start to solve that problem? For example, Milton and Colchester, you have a lot of, actually, I think anywhere in northern Chittenden County, they can't do health sciences in Chittenden.
They don't have that.
No, they have to fight to go to Bellows free. So we're constantly hearing that it doesn't necessarily solve the CTE access problems just to draw lines on that.
It doesn't solve all the problems. We certainly, not every career technical education center offers every type of CT. We do have a process and we do have a procedure now for when that, like I know, for example, in my area, Riverbend does not have electrical. And so if you're in one of those school districts down there, there's a process for them to come up to St. Johnsbury to get electrical. There might be some kids that go the other way. They have, I think, a few programs that we don't have. So there are ways for those kids to move across. Is it the best way possible? Are there different policies that might make that situation easier? I think so. Probably it's worth a conversation. Again, every time you put a line on a map, you're creating something. And so, yeah.
So what do you see as the cost saving of these lines on the map, or the quality value for students?
Well, I think the quality value for students is you're making it, I think, easier for a number of kids to access CTE that it might not be easy for right now. As far as the cost savings, I think cost savings is and it's been, is there other 12 here? 13. That 13 is
13.
Maybe I missed
With the islands?
Okay.
14 with the island. Yeah. I think the cost savings is that operating 14 business offices, superintendent's offices would be far less
So
expensive.
these would all be districts, not supervisory unions.
Either or, but each would have
One
one
business
superintendent's office, one business.
One superintendent's office, one business.
Yeah, so 14 probably more robust
Mhm.
superintendent offices than we have now relative to 52 superintendent's offices, some of which are probably too small to offer the robust basic services that our kids need. Okay. Any other questions about this map? And then I think we'll get to Senator Ron Hinsdale's next questions. Yeah, okay. So, so the way this is divided up, if you look, and I'm looking at this map right
The
now.
transportation. Oh,
No,
no,
this
not
map
this one.
right now.
Okay.
Yeah. Is in a number of areas of the state. There are no independent schools per se. And in those areas of the state, those governance units that are depicted in white here on this map, without any independent schools, no dissimilar structures, everybody's in pre-K through 12, that a supervisory district made sense, and probably a supervisory district with intra-district choice, which would actually give kids a lot more choice than they have right now, especially at the high school level. So everywhere you see on white on the map, if you transpose it onto the others, so that those white areas would be governance units that are supervisory districts. Okay,
Can I ask a question?
yeah,
Are you, let's just take this white area. Are you
Yeah.
saying choice with transportation?
no, I'm just talking about
Okay.
choice of school,
Okay.
inter-district.
Sometimes choice is, falls if you don't have the transportation
would
for
be-
CT.
Yeah, I would leave it up to each supervisory district to
Okay.
solve those transportation problems, yeah. In the areas on this map where you see the kaleidoscope of colors, different colors, okay? Those are all areas in the state that would be supervisory unions, okay? And, but with the caveat that within each supervisory union, like structured school districts would be required to merge. Okay, so I'll use mine. I'm a little more familiar with Caledonia County. If you see up in Caledonia, there is all those magenta districts. Okay, those are currently 3 different school districts. That's Caledonia Co-op, Kingdom East, and St. Johnsbury. Under this construct, because they're all pre-K through 8, the same structure, they would be required to collapse into one school district. Yeah, one school district within that supervisory union, because they're like structures. And if there are pre-K through 6s that are within the same supervisory union, they would collapse into one non-operating, so on. Okay, so there is merging going on in here by like districts are merging into larger units. Okay, and so why SUs in these areas? Well, because we have independent schools. We have a lot of receiving public schools. Public schools receive a lot of kids. In fact, there's far more public schools that receive public tuition students than there are independent schools. And so by using supervisory unions, that would continue in these areas. The state would allow for kids to use public tuition and access whichever independent or public school that they need to access.
So these maps don't fully overlap. Or they do.
They do. These 2 maps right here
Yeah,
fully overlap.
except in the white areas where you're saying.
Yeah, so the white areas, this
Okay.
would refer to Addison, Washington, Lamoille, Fairfax, Chittenden, and Grand Isle.
Mhm.
That's that big white area.
Mhm.
And then the white area in the southeast corner, that would be what we call the Southwest Area Supervisory District, which is Wyndham and a lot of Wyndham and a lot of Windsor.
Mhm.
Yeah, so they do overlap. Yeah. And so that was our thinking there, to retain the SU model would allow for that public tuitioning, which allows these kids in a lot of cases, pretty rural areas of the state. It allows them some diversity of options. It wouldn't force any town to sever its relationship with its receiving public school or its receiving independent school. But they would be like school districts would be required to merge in that. So like I said, more familiar with my area, but those three districts, they would merge into one 3,500 student supervisory school district within that supervisory.
So it struck me that, maybe it's because I'm from the part of the state that has a lot of schools.
Yeah.
But a lot of the struggles we've heard are about having the resources to build a comprehensive regional high school. Right. So the votes that typically are going down are about, should we be investing more than deferred maintenance in this school, in this high school, when there's another high school close by? Like, is this high school the best investment ever dollars? And we're stretched about where the state is putting bonding, capacity and like where school construction dollars should go. I'd like to run by you, this notion that, first of all, wherever we draw the lines, those communities should be responsible for paying for the infrastructure of some regional high school, that they should be sharing some decision making in the future about what infrastructure they're going to fund. And right, we heard, for example, in the White River area, they all still focus on, okay, we have a middle school, so that's our responsibility. 2 towns are carrying the bonding vote for the White River High School. I personally don't see how towns sending $5,000 more per pupil maybe in tuition compares to taking a vote on shared bonding and shared infrastructure costs. And then at some level, the state can direct its dollars within these lines to say, this is the regional high school where we're going to put forth additional dollars for school construction, so that we're all putting skin in the game to get regional high schools. I don't know any other way that we get fairly achieve regional high schools.
Well, I think current law actually gets you where you want to be. The allowable tuition report, which gets issued every year, they calculate what the cost to operate a high school is, which includes debt, and the sending district, that public school, is obligated to pay that allowable amount, which covers the share of the debt per each child. So I think current law already, and the way tuition is set by the public schools and the way it's trued up, billed back, or whatever you want to call it, by the public schools to their sending school districts. I think it addresses
But
everything you're talking about.
if they're sending to a high school that's not comprehensive and has no plans to be comprehensive, then they're not putting dollars into a regional high school, right? So in White River, you have
They're putting in our current system, they're sending dollars to cover the capital expenses or bonding at the school that the child attends.
right. So that could be Sharon Academy.
No, that only allowable tuition only is for public schools. Independent schools don't have the ability to set allowable or to bill back. That's only something that public schools do.
I thought we were changing that in Act 73, but right now they can charge an additional amount.
Right now, all independent schools in the state of Vermont charge average announced tuition, unless they have for example, if their voters make a decision to send more, or if they follow EQS, Bedford and Sharon, I think, followed EQS, or they operate a CT center. So St. John's, Linden operate a CT center. They have the ability to set their tuition, but what they don't have the ability to do is, after the school year is over, to do a calculation of what the actual cost of educating that child was, including debt, and billing back to the school district. The only schools that have that can do that are the public school system.
I guess I'm struck by this case study where 2 towns are aren't seeing the mechanisms that they would have to get the rest of their supervisory union to pay for their public high school. So you have two towns saying, are we the ones on the hook for funding this entire public high school?
Well, they're the ones that have the vote and are ultimately responsible for the note. But the bill, the bonding bill, which is included in the allowable tuition setting, would be being paid by all sending districts that send kids to that.
But only per student. And if they send them to
On a
another high
student
school,
basis.
they're not.
If the child went to a different high school, let's say one of those kids is pretty far west and they decided to go to Rutland
Mhm.
High School, for example. Rutland has its allowable tuition rate that covers their costs, including any bonding that's associated with Rutland High School. And in that case, the money would go to Rutland High School. But if the child went to Woodstock, which I think is what we're talking about here, Woodstock High School.
And we're talking about White River and Royalton.
Oh, in Royalton. Okay, so that if it's a public school in that area and a child is going there, then the allowable tuition true-up makes it so that the sending district, in the end, sends an amount of money to that receiving district that covers that bonding.
And that's what
Yeah.
Jamie told us that when we were.
Yeah.
Right. What I struggle with is and I need someone, maybe JFO, to highlight this for us. If say you're in Royalton and you pay for the bond for your high school, but your child goes to Sharon Academy, are you paying twice?
Well, I can't say, is Royalton a choice community?
No, Royalton's not choice.
Royalton's not choice, so those kids will go to that public.
Okay, I mean, it sounded like in that supervisory union, you had kids in Royalton who said, I chose to go to Sharon Academy.
No,
No,
we're
not
not changing any structure. So if you're a pre-K through 12 right
Uh-huh.
now,
Yeah.
and you have a public high school that's part of your district that your kids go to, we're not severing that at all. So, for example, in the southwest corner, you have Mount Anthony,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so Mount Anthony, the towns that are part of the Mount Anthony Union School District are fully operating districts. They're in green.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not giving choice to those communities. Those communities would still send all of their children to Mount Anthony Union High School. Yeah, all the green areas,
Mm-hmm.
those are
I think
all
that's
areas.
helpful.
Yeah, those are all
Yeah.
areas that do not have public tuition. They do not have
Right.
choice.
So, I mean, shouldn't Rutland Town just be paying for Rutland High School instead of paying a tuition? Like, shouldn't they be taking the same vote to fund their
Well,
central
they're not,
CTE? and
they're
Rutland
not,
High School?
Rutland Town is not part of the Rutland City School District. They are,
Then what exactly does this achieve in terms of savings and getting people to be paying into a regional high school?
this is not a regional high school proposal. It's a CTE proposal. I think the regional high school is, in a regional high school proposal, as I understand, it's not anything the task force advanced. It's not anything that I worked on. But I think when you say regional high school, okay, well, what happens to all the high schools that aren't regional?
Well, they're at least maybe not,
Yeah,
they don't get our very limited school construction dollars. Should we put those forward?
maybe that would be a policy decision. But
Otherwise, I guess I don't really see the savings of this map. Like what you're saying.
well, I
this
think,
map.
I think that's a great. It's a question that the task force grappled with.
Mhm.
And I said several times, I said, I don't think you're thinking of the question correctly, because under Act 73, there is no savings. In the sense that what I mean by that is,
Tell that to the governor.
yeah, no, but what I mean by that is that whether we have 10,000 schools in public schools in the state of Vermont,
Mhm.
or we have 200 public high schools, or 150 or 100 public high
Mhm.
schools in the state of Vermont, the foundation formula is the same amount of money.
Mhm.
Right? You're going to spend the same amount of money regardless of what you have for districts, regardless of what you have for school buildings.
And that's
So-
exactly what I'm saying is the foundation formula is somewhat inclusive of deferred maintenance. But voters have said, you want us to pay more on top of that to bond for a high school. And we're not seeing necessarily how you're all working together to produce a regional high school at a rate we can afford. It's an addition on top of the foundation formula.
That's not the way I read the foundation formula.
There's never been money for future school construction in the foundation formula. Otherwise, we would have actually solved the problem.
I think it's some, I mean,
There's deferred maintenance dollars that are very small.
I think the way the law is written right now is the foundation formula is it. It's what you receive until unless the legislature says it doesn't cover this and we're going to pay for this some other way. And which is my point is that the point of redistricting and changing the number of school districts and maybe the number of schools and maybe the grades that each of those schools serves is not an exercise in saving money, because the way Act 73 is written right now, regardless of what decision is made, the same amount of money is going to get spent. What we're talking about here is trying to design the most efficient system so that those finite number of dollars get spent in a way that is the best for kids.
Improve efficiency in hopes
Yeah.
that it's gonna save us money.
So
So nothing here
let's,
changes the foundation amount.
I mean, let's go back then
Yeah.
up here
Yeah.
where you have huge disparities right now in teacher pay.
Okay.
How do you see this big white blob saving money when that's a lot of differences in what they're spending money on?
Again, they're going to get the same amount of money. If they have disparate teacher contracts.
But
in
who's
that district,
they? Yeah.
Any, you know, if we're talking Chittenden, for example, I don't know what the disparity is between the teacher contracts in any of the districts in the Chittenden County
Mhm.
area are right now. But whether they're very disparate or very similar, that district under the foundation would get the same amount of money. And so
So you'd maintain the lines over here in the white space, or you're just, what is the white
Yeah.
thing?
it's right.
Yeah,
Is
white
this-
space just it told you that they have
Yeah. So for example,
public high space.
so
But there's just no dark lines that show any district, so I'm just not sure.
there.
This is overlaid
One,
with the
two,
dark line.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are all the districts within that white space.
And it was unclear to me if this white space was like, could be one district. I wasn't sure why you left it without
Could
the
be, that
line.
wasn't the decision we made, but it could be. I mean, we didn't.
Okay.
We said we're going to turn it into 6. These 6
Mhm.
right here.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the reason it's white is because it's fully operating.
No, it's just that those are all supervisory districts. Remember,
Yeah.
Grand Isle is a
Oh,
choice
just
district.
sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, district.
Yeah.
So,
All this does is it provides the additional detail of what will happen in the supervisory. So the areas with color, those will be supervisory units.
okay.
The areas that are white, those will be supervisory districts.
And it doesn't really ask them to do anything differently.
No, it does.
One superintendent, one business.
Light structured districts have to work. So these 3 districts right here, they have to merge into one district because
So like all the yellow ones are one district,
they would be required to merge into one.
to one district.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And all the greens would as well, for that matter.
So we go from 52 SU, sorry, large, that's 419 districts to 14 and a lot less, because you 50 districts.
Yeah, a lot of
districts.
Yeah. I didn't count them up. I guess probably in the neighborhood of 25. 25
And it would
districts.
theoretically make it easier for kids to access CDs as they exist, because they be able to go right up boundaries. So I said,
And that was our goal, was to increase the access to see,
Mhm.
not to break up any existing school districts and to retain the existing, the 90 towns that use public tuition and public or independent schools.
So can I ask a CTE question then, like a CTE access question?
Sure.
And because I want to test all these maps for the problems they're able
Yeah.
to solve.
Okay.
So we talk about Stafford a lot in Rutland
Right.
because
Yeah.
it's an incredible model, incredible
Yeah.
accountability, and staff
Yeah.
has a wait list. I think one of our goals is to try and get rid of wait lists for CTEs.
Yeah.
Would your map somehow solve that problem?
I think it makes it better. If
Okay.
you would want, if you'd like more detailed, more detailed answer and information. I think that Ruth
Turkey.
Durkee could come in But we did test for that.
Mhm.
We also, at part of the conversation, we also, theorized, it kind of shows up on this map with all the lines, but, that we have, we, a couple areas in the state where we have what we call a, career and technical education center black hole, where there really isn't, Manchester, for example, fits that description. It's, fairly far north of Bennington, it's fairly far south of, Rutland, and then you have all the mountain towns that, come down into it that add to the travel time to either. We identified that this, a current technical education center in Manchester would likely help kids. We also, had some conversation about, one at what is, now, in proximity to the Champlain Valley Union campus. A lot of kids there,
Yeah,
no CTE center.
yeah.
And we also, the distance between the Essex Center for Technology and
Mhm.
the one at Barry at Spalding High School, there's quite a distance there
Yeah.
between those two. And it makes sense to, put something in the Waterbury or Harwood area. So those were conversations that we had.
I just heard from
So-
South Burlington that all 4 of their students who applied for HVAC were denied.
Yeah, that's a problem.
To go where?
Yeah.
It must have been Essex.
I would guess.
I think they have the HVAC. I don't think Burlington.
Yeah.
Burlington's not operating right now because
I think
of Macy's.
with 22,000 kids in the Chittenden County area.
Yeah.
And your biggest district and school being at Champlain Valley,
Mhm.
I think it probably makes a lot of sense to add a third
Mhm.
tech center. Yeah. So that was a conversation that we,
Over the course of the years, yeah.
yeah.
So,
Okay,
We did not achieve perfection, but a lot of the questions that you are asking are questions that we asked, and in some cases, maybe would require a little more exploration or some explanation from Rooster.
Mhm.
thank you.
Okay?
Yeah.
All right,
Thanks.
thank you. He's got the over again.
take a couple
Why
hours.
not?
All right, have fun.
I'm gonna just check on this other meeting and come back if I can. And have my chair.
So, yeah, you can take the seat real good. Make sure that it's in front of that.
Yeah.
See if you put right back. Go. Okay, we'll get started. So go ahead. So like I said at the beginning, what we're doing now and a lot this week is we had the secretary put on the table, not something they're saying is their proposal per se, so I want to be clear about that, but also their best shot so far under, and then by virtue of the model. But then we've got the map that Senator Beck has put in front of us. And so we're just trying to test, get reaction, get a feel for what people are thinking as they look at these maps and the notion of maps at all and that, so it's why we've had you in before, but not directly on this issue. So that's what we're trying to do this week is really just do some testing and get some thoughts.
Yeah, so for the record, Jay Nichols, Senior Executive Director, Senator Mike Badge says Senior Executive Director. Yeah, so I've just
Oh, wow.
changed. Yeah. Asked me the other day after. So, what I want to do today is, my testimony today is twofold. First, to point out a few considerations related to testimony shared by the AOE. And secondly, to share a concept memo that the BPA believes is a better path forward to ultimate educational and transformation statement. So real quickly, on the VSBA regions map, this is a loose configuration that basically copies the VSBA regions. And we just want to be clear, there's no connection to school governance that would benefit mapping and government entities from the VSBA. Those maps are created just for regional meetings that they have a couple times a year for school board members to get together, give training, share legislative evidence.
So when you say that, you're referring to which one?
The one that's called the VSBA regions map. That's what the secretary called it.
Okay.
Yeah. And some of those districts would be still bigger than 8,000. Although we personally feel, or we know that 4,000, 8,000 student enrollment has no real basis in the overall research. We do agree that once you get past 8,000, there's quite a bit of research that talks about defining efficiencies. So we want to be careful of getting above that. And we can provide you with research on that, but we know last year the Vermont Superintendent's Association gave you a bunch of research on district sizes. And some of the districts drawn out in that model would not have a high school, while others would have many high schools. Then you saw the regional high school districts proposal. We think that that's marginally better than the VSB or Regents math. But we worry that we'll break up some supervisory unions to supervisory districts. I agree with what Senator Beck said 2 minutes ago. We have to be really careful about that, because then we start getting into all kinds of legal things with contracts that are different, legal entities, who owns the property. So to the degree possible, regardless of what you do, you should try to keep people working together that have been working together. We still think that's too focused on an artificial number of 4,000. We understand the attempt at reaching scale, make the math work, but we don't think governance should be an afterthought in service of desired financial end. And then on the hybrid, some of the same issues, but at first review appears to be the better of the three options if you're going to choose one of those three to start playing them. I wanted to say that all the organizations in schools do the work point to cost drivers in education. I spent a lot of time on this, you're all aware of them, that they have little or no control over: unfunded and funded mandates, out of control healthcare costs, obligations once in the general fund being moved to the education fund. We think any long-term solutions have to address these cost pressures. And we are in meetings, Jeff Banner and I and other V's, trying to come up with recommendations that we can all agree to relate to academic training. In the meantime, the VPA has been meeting, and we've shared the concepts below with many of our educational partners. So we're going to share them with you today. I don't want this to come out as this is the VPA's plan or VPA's proposal. I don't want all kinds of letters from people. We're just trying to do some thinking to help you think. So if the General Assembly, and I have underlined it in bold, is convinced that forced mergers, a foundation formula, and governance structures must be part of any solution, we offer the following concepts for your consideration. Firstly, we would say that you take all supervisory unions and merge them into school districts. The rationale for that is it's easier transition to merge operations and structures. You would have similar or the same policies and contracts. In many cases, many SUs already have the same contracts for teachers and employee bargaining groups. Not all, many do. You'd be working with people you already are supposed to be working with to find efficiencies and effectiveness. You'll be less likely to completely end the entire education delivery system, which is a major concern of ours. And you would allow for some level of system stability to the disruption that huge changes in the system have on student staff. You move 119 districts to 51, and then we would say you look at combining under 1,000 where practicable. I gave you a list of places that I believe would be under 1,000. For example, Essex North, Canyon area. And then we would say that there should be local representation for each town of the school boards. One of the things that we don't want to see people lose is that local feeling of voice and support in their school system. So we want each town to have representation. Is it better if I stop at each one of these suggestions to take questions, or do you want me to keep going?
If people have a question, they can just.
Feel free to interrupt me anytime.
So I have a question.
Yeah,
So when we talk about school boards, is that a necessity, or can we, each school have an advisory board that we set policies so that they have teeth if there's issues? So rather than having all kinds of school boards, each school will have, depending on its size, how many board members that we need. And that way you're getting representation of every school board. Rather than you have a committee where I think it'd take a lot of politics out of it too, because right now, up in like Burlington, that it can get very, well, any school district can get very political.
so we'd be talking about here going from 119 boards to 51. So you'd have less than half the boards you have right now. You'd still have one of the highest rates of school board members per student in the nation, which is something I think Vermont's been pretty proud of having, high representation of school boards. And that those boards would actually have real authority. That doesn't mean you still couldn't have advisory boards in local schools. You certainly could. But when you use the word policy, for me, policy's up here. And it belongs to the school board level, dictate to the superintendent. What are the expectations for what we're doing as a district? What is our guiding vision? And to me, that should be at the school board governance level. not the local level with the principal. It should be the superintendent and the school board together. That's policy to me. And this would still give us a lot less boards than we have right now. Okay, great question. Thank you. The second thing we would say after, and again, this is all if you're intending on implementing Act 73 or something like that, or educational transformation. You'd encourage voluntary mergers of newer, larger SDs. And we would say that you would look at using a stick and a carrot approach. The carrot would be grants and incentives to help with this work for systems that want to do it, using educational opportunity payments as potential carrot lever. So for example, let's go up my way. So you've got Franklin Northeast as a supervisory union, and you tell them you're now going to become a district. Okay, boom, they become a district. Then you've got next to them the Missisquoi School District that became a district with Act 46. You could encourage those two to join. You could require them to. Let's be honest. You can do what you want. You're the General Assembly. You get to decide. The Supreme Court's been pretty clear about that. If you decide you wanted to join, some of the things they're going to need is consulting help on how to do that. How do they, and some legal, how do they merge those contracts? How do they take care of debt services? How do they take care of all those things? So a carrot for those types of things could be, listen, we want to help you find efficiencies. We're going to give you expertise support to help you do this. So if you're going to require anybody to merge, we're suggesting that you give them the support so they can merge in a way that's efficient, effective, legal, and addresses those concerns that are going to happen. Merger's not easy. Having been part of it, it's not easy. We're talking about pretty big merger here. We also suggest that you use class sizes, as incentive as we are now, or as a stick, and that we use a number from 1,000 to 4,000 as an overall district number as a measuring stick, as opposed to the 4,000, which doesn't really have any research base to it that we can see. There are school districts all over the United States with 1,000 kids, even less than 1,000 kids, that are very, very successful. So we would suggest that you look at that number. And the other reason I picked that number, for the admitting I picked it, is because then most of the systems that you already have, supervisory unions and school districts, would easily be able to turn into becoming a school district with one board, one superintendent, one business office, one set of policies, and you have some efficiencies.
So I don't understand what the stick is you're talking about.
What?
I get the class size stuff,
Class size.
but I'm not quite sure how that works.
Well, the class size, the way it works right now,
What happens if you merge versus don't merge? You just class size.
well, if you merge, what happens is, especially if you're an existing SU, you can share staff. So you can get to those class sizes, and you can share students. Whereas right now, in a lot of places, you can't share them. So I was talking to a principal this morning. In fairness to her school is going to close. They've already decided. But she was like, if we don't have any choice anyway. We're never going to be able to make the class sizes stuff. And because she's in a supervisory union, she can't even share with the school right next to her. And they've got 2-3 schools that their kids are going to go to, and there's plenty of room in all those schools. So she knows that her kids are going to go to other schools close by. But in the current structure she has, if her school did close, they can never make the class size. There's no way they could beat it. They've already got combined 2 3s and 3 4s that still don't make the number.
So we have,
Oh, this is good. This is fine.
about this, but we have the law now that says it has the class size statements.
That's part of 73 right now.
So when you talk about that being a stick, it's already there.
Yes,
So how does it become a stick?
I think it becomes a stick because if people don't fulfill it, then they're in a position where they're going to need to merge further.
Oh, so the stick really is what we've already built in.
Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Sorry if I wasn't clear on that.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
No, you've already built it in,
Okay.
and we're going to say to people, listen, if you can't get there through merging
Yeah.
into current districts, then you're going to have to merge further. Okay. The foundation formula, again, if you're going to follow through the foundation formula, we would suggest that it would go into effect after the merger concept's in place with a 1-year lag, so school districts can actually see what they need to spend. We would suggest, as current law says, that education spending above state payment would be subject to vote by citizens of a new district, which is in current law, current Act 73. We would recommend a goal to reduce growth of education spending over time and slowly close disparities and equalize per pupil spending. Accurate modeling would need to take place for all current created school districts. And this is, to me, these next two are kind of a biggie. Allowance for moving downward in education spending over a set period of time by a transition method set by the state is necessary. And the rationale is we do not want to make large, impactful cuts to systems that are already largely in scale simply because they pay their personnel well. So the CBU district's got 84 teachers in 2 years. That's not good for kids. We need to be thinking about how do we take those places that are already at scale, but are spending more money than the foundation formula simply because they pay the teachers more. If they were in classes of 6 kids, 10 kids, I'd be saying like, hey, you need to combine. When you go into those buildings, they've already got 20 kids in the class, 25 kids in the classroom. So I think we need to build some mechanism to protect those places that are already at scale so those kids don't get hurt as we move towards the foundation formula. And the only reason they're paying more than the foundation formula is because they pay their staff. So I think we need to be cognizant of that. On the other side of that is F, making sure we protect local taxpayers and lower spending districts to make sure that any corresponding required increased education spending doesn't adversely impact Vermonters and lower spending communities. Now, I talked briefly offline with Representative Kornheiser on this. She thinks the second home tax has provision in there that will protect that, but that's something I think you want to really make sure, or at least Senate Finance wants to make sure. What we don't want to do is say to Richford, one of my former communities, listen, you guys, it's a very poor town. We're gonna give you more money for education. We're also gonna raise your taxes up and price you out of your homes. So we need to be cognizant of that. And then the BPA remains skeptical in general about a foundation formula, and we worry that FSUs and SDs will be put together in a manner that makes the math work, but does nothing better serve children. So we're hoping to be really thoughtful about that. Next part, school closures. Again, only if you're gonna move forward, actually, I just like to say that. But I don't want anybody to think that I'm advocating for you to do this. Local school districts make these decisions. All voters in the district vote. I testified in front of you folks the other day on the Commission on Future Public Education. We would suggest you follow that process. So the local voters have a chance to get input, but ultimately it's the new district that votes on whether or not they're going to close whatever school it is.
Can you say that again?
Local voters in the new district, whatever that new district is. So let's use up my way. At Berkshire, Bakersfield, Richford, Enosburg, Sheldon, and whoever I'm forgetting, Montgomery, they were told now you guys are no longer a supervisor union, you're one district instead of right now they're 2. In that district, if you decide you want to close one of those schools as a board, everybody in that community is part of the vote to discuss that, and then the board makes the final decision.
Community or the school, not the district.
The whole district.
Yeah, okay.
That new community, but the whole district's a better word to say it's under.
Wouldn't that be obvious to the district?
It's not because right now.
It's their choice.
Yeah, right now it's not because we have Act 46, we had articles of agreement come out of that. And that's caught a lot of people's thinking in the commission. We heard over and over people thinking that they had veto rights when schools closed. And some of those towns do because it's in their articles of agreement, but it's not in the law. The law is pretty clear that the school gets to make that decision.
So it's up to the voters in the district, the new district.
They would all vote, they would give information to the board, but the board would make the decision, is what we're recommending.
So how's the vote used?
Informal.
An advisory vote?
Well, we have advisory input. You saw that they both were in there, so you could do a survey or you could do a vote. And you could, when you set up your new district, you can set up any way you want to. So you could say each town has an individual vote and the town can veto it. You could say it's a vote of the
Talking
whole
about the
group.
composition of the school. Right, that comment was about the composition.
I would want representation of each town on the board.
Well, in essence, just like we have representation of every town in our county.
Yeah.
It's kind of a parallel process. The school board just has a different footprint.
Yes.
That they represent. They may come from, 2 from that area and, et cetera, but
But remember, the bigger your
I
districts
understand the
are,
process, the rationale for the vote, of the town's vote, which has no weight, but it's kind
well,
of
it
advisory.
depends what's in your articles of agreement when you form your new
I understand
district.
the logic.
Yeah, if you form your new district, it could be completely up to the voters. But if it is, we're saying it should be up to the voters of the whole district,
The new
not
district.
one town in that new district.
Sure.
So like Berkshire couldn't have veto rights over everybody else in the system.
Back to my point.
Yeah.
They would vote, they would know what they need to do, to get away from forced murder. I mean, nobody wants us to tell us how to murder.
Right.
And they know how to murder. Based on giving the equation, all the components of it, so they don't want to figure
We
it
think
out.
the more say people have in the system.
So articles of agreement, once this thing is folds out, be have to be regretted.
Well,
Everybody's gonna have to become the same page.
you tell me, you guys need to decide, you're the general assembly. I'd be really concerned about the bigger your district gets, the less the average person is gonna feel they have say on that school board. So if you have a board that stretches, one board that stretches all across this white section on that other map.
No, that was.
No.
No, I'm not saying it was, but the governor's first proposal was 5. Yesterday, we heard the number 13 or 14. Think about how many towns you're including in there. So are you on a board of 45 people? So those things have to be thought about. We think this is an easier way to move forward because you have people that already work together. Supposedly, in supervisor unions, they're already supposed to be sharing curriculum. They're supposed to be sharing some specialized services. They should have a lot of the same policies, so it should be a little easier to fix. Other questions about the school closure part? Choice, we took the gutless approach. District school boards decide if they're gonna have choice or not. Boards who do have choice, delegate to schools, they will allow their pupils to attend. Current law talks about 3 delegations. It says, you know, what the rules are around that. We would say you leave it up to the school board of the new district. They want to send, as long as the school's approved by the state, they want to send the kids to an approved independent school. They want to send the kids to public school. If they want to send the kids to 10 different public schools and 3 different independent schools, let the board decide.
So you're telling that if I have choice in mind, that it would be up to the school board at this point decide, hey, I was thinking of sending my child here, but the school board decided, no, we're gonna send all our children there.
Yeah, which is what it already is. Your board may allow you to go anywhere, but they can change it anytime.
Okay.
So this would be the current law, only would be on a bigger scale.
So that what you said isn't true if it's not operating district.
Good point.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And,
yeah, sorry.
go ahead.
So under this, all districts and in all of the larger districts, every district would have the opportunity to have choice or not.
They have, their board has to make the decision. What to do. So look at Colchester. It's gonna be simple. They're gonna send all their kids to Colchester. They've already got a high school in their system. Nothing really changes in terms of their governance model. Unless they decide they want to join with Essex. Those two decide to merge together. They're gonna have to have conversations about what does that mean? Do the kids go to live closer to Essex, go there? The kids need to choose based inter district choice based on their, you know, the programming. Maybe one school's more of a STEM school, one school more as an art school. They will be able to decide that stuff. And the places where it's going to matter more, I think, are in the bigger SUs, where right now some places already have choice. How do you do that in a system that's going to be one district board overseeing it? Because you want to make sure that all kids have the same opportunities, which is the difficult part. It'd be simple if we didn't have to reckon with that issue. So I don't think it's the perfect answer. Certainly, I've got members that think that kids should only be able to go to a public high school near them. Others that think they only should be able to go to one of the Forest Turk academies in public schools. We got members all over the place. We're saying instead of fighting that fight, let the local school board make that decision. And then we would grandfather any kids that are already in a school, allow them to continue their education career at that school. School infrastructure, we'd ask you to develop and fund school construction program, finance the program at whatever level you can. Look at the Rhode Island, Massachusetts work, which I know you've already done. And then we would actually incentivize school districts that are looking to combine student populations into new and or updated and modernized facilities. Look a little bit towards what Senator that was sitting here said earlier. You know, if we can have really high quality regional high schools, we think that's the way to go. And to do that, it's going to cost money to do that. So we would say incentivize communities that come together and say, hey, we're going to build this new 1,500 student high school in this part of the state, right here in the center of our, and because of that, we're going to close these 3 high schools where the buildings, the walls are falling down or whatever. Help us to do that, incentivize us to do that. And we would actually try to incentivize that. Yeah.
Can I ask a question of the group? In the governor's budget address, did he mention school construction funding, seed money?
I didn't think he did.
I don't think he did either. I just wondered if anybody else picked that.
The only thing I've heard, well, I asked the question of the secretary and, or deputy, you know, what money would be used for school construction? They basically said that any school district that didn't spend the per pupil amount, that amount would go back into a school infrastructure fund. If we really don't have a fund right.
Yeah.
There's still, we still have a moratorium.
Yeah, well, we haven't had any new money since 2005 for it. It's you can see it when you look at buildings.
So, you know, everybody's they'd be incentivized to spend all the money. For sure.
We got to set the vision.
Okay, and the last part is cooperative education service areas, like what I always call BOCES. You know, we think you should lean into those. You should try to provide state level support for systems that are willing to implement those partnerships. And I gave a couple examples that I know of from New York, where they share payroll and other HR functions. Just kind of cool. You have a major problem with a employee of the HR nature that needs to be investigated. You get the BOCES that does that for you. Or you have an alternative school where all the kids that have a certain need are brought to the alternative school and give them programming that they need. And then lastly, I want to read the note out loud to you at the end. The purpose here is to get at real reform without completely disrupting the educational delivery system. We believe this will move the state in a direction that gets to better scale. It will make it easier to further combine districts if the General Assembly decides to do that in the future. We believe it would be a lot more tolerable for Vermonters and would allow neighbors to work with neighbors that they already have relationships with. I'm a little more or less pumped about mergers than I used to be, simply because I've listened to 4,000 or 5,000 Vermonters over the last 18 months. And so I think if we're going to do mergers, we should have people that are already working with, because I think Vermonters are not going to support it. Just not.
So you mean mergers be voluntary?
Well, no, I think if you're going to do mergers, then not necessarily be voluntary, but at least have it be with people that are already working together, which would be SUs. Let's let them become a district, one board, one superintendent, one operating
What if they
system.
want to remain an SU?
The problem with SU is there's no efficiencies in my opinion, for the two reasons that I gave you the other day. One, you can't share staff. So if you can figure out how SUs can share staff and make it actually work. And the second one is when kids move, usually it's poor kids, go from one town to another, they have to change schools. And we know those are our kids that have our lowest test scores, they have our biggest behaviors, and they have the highest levels of chronic absenteeism. We've got to help those kids, and SUs don't do service to those kids. And I'm from an SU, and I was a student at SU.
Yes, we
So
got
just, I wish I had heard a little bit more about, the CTE component of this plan, because,
From us?
Yeah.
We had
I know.
nothing here with CT.
okay, so, but, I know what the governor wants. And we have, if we close a school, there's possibility, I know that like Stafford, they need seats. They don't have enough room.
Yeah.
We could take one of those schools and turn that into an annex of Stafford, for example. So, I see the plan being grounded in CTE and it's kind of, we really need to include them in the conversation.
Yeah, so our thought has been from day one that whatever you do with CTE should be part of the big conversation. We don't think going out and doing something completely separate with CTE and have the state take over CTEs is the way to go. And the CTE directors do not do that either.
Just an observation. So everything in the memo is predicated on the big if.
Yeah.
If we're convinced, forced district mergers, foundation formula on governance. So we're trying to correct the problem of escalating costs and declining performance. But I haven't heard, and I don't remember this over the course of last year, is the alternate solution. What, if you're not on board, the big if you're not on board for this, what's your solution?
I think the best solution is this.
Okay, that's okay.
I
Because when
absolutely.
you say if, and then everything
Well,
else
because
follows.
it's
like,
you, because it's you that gets to make.
Yeah, but we want your opinion. You're
Yeah.
here testifying. You're not here to just regurgitate everything we're saying.
I'm not regurgitating anything. This
Good,
is
very good.
putting me at
That's
rest with some
important.
of my members. We talked about it a lot as a board, and we think this has the potential to actually, over a period of time, help contain
Okay,
costs
that's important.
and provide more services for kids. And that's what we should be focusing on.
Thank you.
Okay?
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Who is next?
I know.
It
You
is
reporters are all like,
Cheryl Turtle.
actually,
Cheryl was up.
Hang on, Cheryl. Hang on.
here.
He's not.
But we don't know that.
We
She said, take my chair.
Oh, she did?
Yeah.
Okay.
But there are three of us, so.
Yep.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
oh,
So if you want to do it as a team up here, that's if you want to do, that's fine. So come
Would
on.
that be all right? Yeah, I'll start, but we need 3 chairs here. That's
3 chairs.
Yeah, 3 chairs. All right,
So next.
but I can start and we'll check hands with work.
No, no, I don't think so.
This one's fine.
I'll send you.
Think about
Strict, I like.
Yeah.
I just.
No. You guys was asking, I thought there was everything over where.
All right, which one?
Chlorine missing. Doing three.
After all.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So I will start, first of all,
So yeah, first of all, obviously introduce yourselves. Yeah, okay.
so to begin, I'm Cheryl Charles. I chair the steering committee for the Rural School Community Alliance, and I'm here with two other steering committee members, Margaret McLean and Dr. Jeannie Albert. And each of us will speak. So our format, if that's all right, we've divided our testimony into three parts. And I'll begin with an introduction that Margaret will follow. Then I'll fill in the middle section, and then Jenny will finish it up. And certainly, knowing you all, you can ask questions at any time. But does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's a way for us to proceed. So we are here representing the Rural School Community Alliance, and I think you know that we are now up to more than 100 towns and villages in Vermont, and our members are typically school boards and select boards, and they would have voted to join the alliance at a warned meeting of theirs. So that's how that has worked. And so we're representing them. And we grew very quickly over this last year. I think you know, up to this again, more than 100, out of a real shared concern about the quality of education in rural Vermont being at risk, with much of the discussion that's been being proposed around educational transformation in Vermont. So we advocate for the importance of rural community public schools and for a democratic release and decision making that affects them. Our members are clear about transformation. We're wanting educational transformation to be positive. Maybe it could be high risk transformation that really destroys a lot of what is working here. And so our members are clear that we believe, at least, that mergers or that transformation won't work if lines are imposed, if mergers are forced. And we see the evidence that forced mergers in rural areas in particular don't save money. They would increase costs, take years of time, reduce the quality of services for students. So that's our background. We have three different categories that we're going to be speaking to you about, beginning with that rural communities have already demonstrated a will to save money and serve students, especially consistent with the needs of rural Vermont, but also consistent with the intent of Act 73. We actually strongly support the new Cooperative Education Services Agency model, and we'll give you some evidence for why we say that. And we have a lot of concerns around the potential for closing schools in rural areas, concerns about equity, and concern about keeping the tuitioning process open. So with that, Margaret, you're next.
Sure. So we are volunteers and we work with volunteers and we have our feet on the ground and we listen to a lot of people. So our positions are developed from that conversations that we have with people. In June, when Act 73 passed, we contacted everybody and we did that to the school boards and we advised them to talk about the law and to engage in a public process that made sense for them as a community. So they did all kinds of different things. They invited legislators to speak at community forums. They had school board meetings, talked about what Act 73 would mean to them. They engaged in very different public processes locally to kind of figure out, well, what does Act 73 mean for my community, for my school? So they did all that work, and it took a while because it was the summer and school boards sometimes don't meet in the middle of the summer. So they staged it out. And by the end of August and September, they had formed some consensus about where they were. And in doing that, they passed motions, many of them. They wrote what they were willing to do to meet the intent of the law, what made sense for them to do. And they submitted that in writing to the task force. So the task force received information from numerous school boards. It also received information from surveys. They engaged with the commission, with with the commission, with Afton Partners, they got all that information. And together around 5,000 individuals and boards communicated with the task force. And that had an impression on the task force. Because what they heard was that there was no support for forced merger, and that there was concern about the extent of the change that some of the maps people were talking about would result in. So it's not so much the maps and the lines. From a centralized perspective, looking down, the maps and the lines can be done in numerous ways that may be acceptable for people. But what people began to understand was, if you're moving from a school district, which takes care of town right now in one school, to a regional school district, you're moving from a very decentralized system, which is what we have now, to a highly centralized system. And you're not staging that, you're doing that in one big thing. And the outcome is very different from anything Vermonters have experienced, and also very different from the way New England has historically evolved and treated schooling over the last couple of hundred years. So one of the things that school boards were really concerned about was, with a map, like this map, what would happen is all existing school districts within those new lines would be dissolved. So they would no longer exist. There would be one new entity in that region, rather than what might have now 6, 7, depending on the area. The other thing that they realized is it is unknown, because it doesn't exactly say in Act 72 what the school board would look like for that big new area. Would there be 5 members? Would each town have a member? It doesn't really say. They also discovered that voting would be in wards. The ward voting task force was set up. Voting wouldn't be by town. And the only thing they vote for in wards is legislators. They don't vote for school board members in wards. They do it by town. So that would change how things operate for that. And that gave them a lot of pause for thought, particularly as research shows, or results from that approach around the country, particularly in rural areas. So this kind of scale of merger shows it doesn't necessarily improve student performance, and it doesn't necessarily save money, particularly in rural areas. So in our testimony, it's not that. The other thing we got from school boards and talking to them was the fact that it's not that they're fearful of change, okay? They're willing to step up and do their part. They're willing to meet the intent of Act 73. But they want to do that as partners with the state. They would like the state to give them expectations and guidelines so that they can work together with their neighbors to figure it out, make it happen. They understand the need for cost efficiencies, and they understand that that's why we're here. I mean, there was an outcry about taxes. That's why we're here. They understand the need for savings and for dealing with the tax system. And they also understand the need for improving standards and for making Vermont schools strong and productive and the best places for rural children. But they don't see this scale of change so dramatically as the best route forward. They see working more organically with their neighbors as the best way forward. So if you go on the Agency of Administration website, you will see all the public comment, and you'll see specifically public comment from school boards. And it says things like, we are already talking to, this is who they're talking to. It says, we're talking internally. Grand Isle is talking internally about going from 3 districts to 1. Essex North was talking with Orleans Central and North Country. Caledonia Co-op was talking. And in all that talking, what they decided and what they submitted to the task force, 26 school boards representing 100 towns passed motions expressing their preference should remain in a supervisory union. In a supervisory union where they work with their neighbors to have one superintendent rather than an individual superintendent for each district. So it's kind of the opposite of what Jay was talking about. Okay. These are the rural towns, and the rural towns find supervisory unions to not be efficient, to be effective. And we'll get some more of that as we continue. So we feel the vision for the future of Vermont in education has to be based on the real world. We're a system that's been built over time, and we're the most rural education state in the nation, and our history and geography is really important. It can lead the way to the next stage of transformation. And we need to do that together. We need to do that in the best interests of children, families, educators, and whole communities. School boards, rural school boards are here to help do that. We need to get this right and avoid harm, particularly to our most vulnerable children, people, and places. So that's what we found from working together.
I'll continue if I may, and I'm going to focus on the shared services model, what the task force ended up calling cooperative education services, service areas. CESA, I prefer just to call it a shared services model. They, one of the reasons we like it so much is that they will give us cost savings immediately. And I'm going to speak to the fact that Wyndham Northeast, the board that I chair, is already a part of the first of those shared services models being called in both cities in Vermont under Act 168. But so shared services models are currently in place in Vermont. A supervisory union is a form of a shared services model. Again, Wyndham Northeast, we already share and transportation, food services, curriculum, administration, so, and obviously special education. But there's value in expanding the number of supervisory unions and districts that are taking advantage of those shared services to be more cost effective, but also by using that model where you have supervisory unions and districts coming together in a cooperative education service agency model, you still get community identity, you still get participatory democracy at the local level while getting those savings. Interestingly, the concept of a CESA or a shared service model statewide, the Alliance is actually very comfortable with every school district and supervisory union in the state being a part of, even being assigned to one. And the reason that we can say that is that you don't dissolve any of the local governance. It's something where you're assigned, you look and you work together with your friends and neighbors to figure out how to save money. We also think that people should be able to move if they find out they've got more in common with someone in a different one. We really truly think it will work to have every district and every union in the state be a part of this new shared services administrative agency model. There is a misperception that we've heard a good bit that these shared services agencies create a new level of administration. We don't think so. That they don't create a new administrative tier. They don't replace the things that are working locally. What they help us with is things that we can't do as well. A very specific example of that I'll get to in a minute has to do with special education. But we can't afford a full-time person, or we can't find one to meet the needs of our kids. But when that shared services agency hires that person, then we only pay for a portion of his or her time, and we meet the needs of those kids. So this shared services model only consolidates those functions that we can't deliver as efficiently or consistently at the local level. But it does give us scale, and it does let us reduce costs. And so there are a great many benefits to this approach. And I'm going to emphasize again, we're already seeing savings in the southeast part of the state now that we've joined, and are incredibly grateful for that. So the Southeast Vermont what's called the voice BOCES because it came out of again Act 168 when that terminology was being used. We were officially approved by the Agency of Education in January. It's 7 supervisory unions and 1 school district. And we actually have as many as 8,000 students in that new collaborative, that shared services or BOCES model. And there's a chart in the testimony that we provided for you. I'm not going to go through all of it, but you'll see significant savings. And in the example that I gave you about the specialized services we need with special education, we can save as much as a half of an FTE. We can save as much as 80% of the cost that we're looking at for those services. So we're actually genuinely excited about that. We also think that we've already been working together, these 7 SUs and this 1 school district through what was previously the Vermont Learning Collaborative in the southern part of the state will now be this new BOCES. But there may be, as time goes on, in addition to the cost savings, we may find it makes sense to create some larger supervisory unions or districts. We'll see. Yes.
Who headed that up to get that organization together?
Jill Graham right now, and I recommend that you listen to her again, that she's very thoughtful and knowledgeable. She is the executive director of the Vermont Learning Collaborative. I think she'll probably transition into being the executive director of the new Southeast Vermont BOCES or whatever we end up calling it. You know, I, as I mentioned, I actually chaired both the Westminster Board and the Wyndham Northeast Supervisory Union Board, and we are already seeing savings from this new collaborative, and we anticipate even more. So please know that we think this is a solid model that's already shown some evidence to work, and we anticipate much more.
Purchase the services.
Yeah, it's 2 different things. As we start this off, the 8 entities, the 7 SUs and the 1 district, we all pay a fee to be a part of it, but that's just to help it get up and running, and it's manageable. It's a form of an assessment, but when we actually are working to get the services of a portion of a specialist's time, then we pay for the time involved. It's a prorated basis, but we don't have to employ, and we can't employ a full-time employee. So it's definitely saving money at a time, especially starting with special ed, when the cost of special education, as you all know, are just escalating, the kids with special
Does the special educator work for the BOCES?
Yeah.
Or is that- okay.
that person, that particular one does.
So you have to have enough money to hire the people first and then
Right.
pay for the services. So
And one of the things that was interesting to me, I learned in talking with Jill Graham recently, is that when the Vermont Learning Collaborative is a 501c3, but by moving into this new entity, it has more leverage as an agency, a public agency, and therefore can get more monies that would not otherwise be available. So it's
grants.
correct.
Yeah, okay.
That's
I
correct.
don't know, whatever. Yeah, okay.
So did you have?
We left it kind of option. It's actually statute. Nobody was mandated, I think, because everybody's gun shy with unfunded mandates.
I'm good.
So you guys have funded it yourself.
Yeah. Right. And
Let's
one,
save you money.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
No,
you may be the model organization for the state.
it's a very good one, and we're happy, again, it's 7 SUs and 1 district. And the SBA map is too big, but for us, but we've managed to work together for some years. And when this opportunity through 168 came up, we took advantage of it in the southern part of the state. We said, okay, we'll be the first BOCES, according to that law. And the one change that we're recommending now is that we think it's really, okay, it would be valuable to have all districts in the state, SUs included, be a part of one of these shared services entities.
Yeah, let's not get hung up. I've got a lot of questions about it, but let's not get hung up
Okay.
on that right now. So we gotta,
I'm going to
Yeah,
transition to Dr. Albert now to help us understand a little more about this SU model and how it actually does save money.
Thank you, Cheryl and Margaret. We included some charts, a bar graph and a line graph, and I actually did bring copies. I know, that's somewhat discouraged, but in case people wanted to see a version, well, more than welcome. So I'm just gonna go over a few things about these charts and, the highlights, around savings from, supervisory unions, and then a touch on the last topic from our written testimony, and then, a few closing remarks. So the charts that we have there's two on this page. As I said, they do, they're meant to highlight in slightly different ways, the cost effectiveness that we've seen from the supervisory union structure in Vermont. The top one on the page with the bars is looking at, spending per weighted pupil just for fiscal 25-26. That's, since we moved to the long-term weighted ADM weights. And you can see the green bars are the spending in per weighted pupil in SUs, and then we also display spending for town and city supervisory districts and merged supervisory districts. So that's one way of looking at cost effectiveness for SUs. The second chart, the one on the bottom, expands the window to 5 years. It's difficult to compare because you've got equalized pupils for some years and you've got LTW-ADM for some years. So this approach, instead, what I did was I displayed total spending for the state. So the dark line, the solid line, is actual spending, statewide education spending, and the dashed lines, the green one, is what we would have spent statewide had we been spending at the SU rate. And the red dashed line is what we would have been spending statewide had we been spending at the merged SD rate. And you can see, again, another way to capture the effectiveness. We would actually see projected savings of 112 million if we had been spending at the SU rate versus an added spending of around 120 million at the merged SD rate. So I think it's we want to focus on effectiveness of SUs. I'll say a little bit more about that. But before leaving the chart, I just wanted to point out that because of the higher level at the merge rate, I think that's just another area of caution when considering a statewide system that's based on merged SDs. But going ahead, just to summarize, we're sharing the charts about the cost effectiveness of supervisory unions to highlight both the value of this form of school district governance itself, especially in rural areas, but also to emphasize their structure as shared services models, as we've stated previously, but namely as a sort of prototype, in a sense, for CSIS that have a successful track record of cost effectiveness. And these data from Vermont provide strong evidence, we think, for pursuing an expanded shared services model through the CSIP framework. So the last topic I will address from our prepared the written testimony that we submitted is regarding some concerns we have around rural school closure and equity. No surprise, current fiscal pressure, along with declining enrollment, has placed intense pressure on rural public schools, specifically pressure to close them. Our rural schools and their communities are often in the crosshairs of a number of policy levers designed to build pressure and force change. These policies unfortunately act as blunt instruments in contrast to careful targeted policy that supports adjustments while building on strengths. Examples of a few of the more blunt instruments are, some of these come up today already, removing closure decisions from the communities that will be impacted by closure, or defining some schools as necessary and therefore de facto others as unnecessary, and also establishing class size minimums, but with arbitrarily determined numbers rather than meaningful guidelines for size and staffing. In this climate, accessibility to schools for families from communities with closed or closing schools becomes increasingly simple. Plus, we have regions of Vermont where public school capacity is already full. Indeed, many communities operate schools only in some grades, and some districts no longer operate any schools. As such, public education deserts increase. Access to schooling becomes arduous for both children and families, in the form of long bus rides for children and complicated employment travel routes and schedules. In towns with large area, in particular and low population density, school choice does fill a need to enable life to function for families when their local school no longer exists. As we know, Act 73 reduced the number of independent schools that are able to receive public tuition. In rural areas especially, the remaining such schools became even more vital options for children living in regions that lack public school capacity. Public comment on this topic overwhelmingly reiterated the importance of school choice. This was something that you've heard too, Margaret, to rural families as a pathway to equity of opportunity, particularly when public schools are closed. They see these schools as valued partners that increase the chance for all students to have access to opportunities that meet their needs. So in closing, just to reiterate some of the main points, Vermonters are nowhere near any kind of consensus on a statewide map of school districts and are strongly opposed to forced mergers based on public comment. Trying to get voters to accept forced mergers into overly large districts would take excessive amount of time, would not reduce cost, and would lose even more trust and acceptance of voters. In order for change in our education system to be successful, it must be organic. The RSCA grew very quickly because the Alliance reflects the reality on the ground in rural areas of Vermont. We think while the cooperative service models get up and running, we do encourage action in the short term to hold down costs, possibly with some kind of flexible spending cap. If you can hold down the rate of increase, the rest can happen organically within districts and will result in cost savings and improved services to Vermont students. So thank you again for this opportunity, and I'm sure we'd be happy to answer any other questions.
So talk a little bit about the notion of the flexible spending cap. What does that actually mean? Officially, got cap and the intrinsic flexibility, and I realize I think it's a distinction. You have to have some means of ameliorating the one instrument, in fact.
Right.
So talk to us about what that actually means to you.
I mean, one example I think that's comes to mind when you think about at least the way I understood discussion that's ongoing about a cap. It's a real challenge, especially in our smaller districts, because of course you could have increased spending because you literally spend more, but you could also have increased spending per pupil because you spend more, but it could also be because your number of pupils are decreasing. And so having some way of acknowledging that that's a different situation. And it's particularly acute. I mean, that can happen in any district regardless of size, but when you don't have a lot of students, even with the loss of very few, can increase your spending per pupil considerably. Even though they really, you wouldn't really need to decrease staff, right? Because it's not really that you really are. You've only lost a few students, so you're not likely to do staff, but nevertheless, your spending per pupil goes up significantly. So I think that type of dynamic is one where considering how to be flexible. That's one way I think that. Yeah, I mean that's one of the bigger ones, and I think there are ways to handle that. There, we could sort of account for that in different ways. There's not intractable, but it's important having
with averages over years.
Well, I mean, one way one way I've considered is you could averages over years is helpful because it deals with fluctuation, and then you could also commit to maintaining the spending level you would have if your pupils hadn't gone down. It's kind of a hold harmless stuff. So there are different ways to do that.
Okay. Questions?
Yeah, I just want to say that, as representatives of the Rural School Community Alliance, we could talk all day about the points that you just brought up, but some of them are pretty inflammatory. And one thing I want to just pull out is the rural schools are not in anybody's crosshairs. They really aren't. It's just the opposite.
I know that.
Hang on, please. So I've listened now for 45 minutes. We're actually trying to support the rural schools, keep them relevant and survive. We're looking at the efficiencies. We're looking at a policy which looks at the efficiencies of schools that are, there's potential overlaps, in geographic areas where there's a number of schools that are lower performing, they're underattended, the populations have dwindled over time, and we're looking to enhance their academic programs. But to come back and even write that rural schools are in the crosshairs of these policies, I think is completely misleading. And I just want to highlight that. But again, we could talk all day about the points that you made in the memo, because I find them a little exaggerated and I don't know, they're obviously exciting a lot of people, and I think they're kind of you might be going down the wrong path. Stop there.
Can I respond in that, we can understand sitting here that that's not the intent to have rural schools in the crosshairs. Rural schools can feel that they're in the crosshairs.
Why?
Because
somebody's told them that.
No,
That's
because they understand the mechanisms of the law will lead to closure.
I just respectfully disagree.
Yeah, well, that's what they feel. They feel this pressure. And we're reporting that to you because that's what we're hearing.
Okay.
That's what we're hearing. And while hearing that, we're also hearing what they recognize issues of declining enrollment, sustainability, and cost. And they're willing to step up and help solve the problems. When you look at the letters to the task force, they all said that. They wish to meet the intent of the law. They're not saying no. They're saying, we would like to work with you to reach these goals. But some of what was presented as the pathway to reach the goals, the large districts, is a huge bridge for them from current state to new state. And the sense of loss between current state and new state is huge for them because of how they've evolved as rural communities historically and how they operate.
So I can't speak for the whole committee, but I listen to everything you said. I can find many things I disagree with. I think one of the buckets that we all as a committee need to understand is that like phase 4 of the transformation is we're going to have to consolidate, contracts for printers and, school buses and all that. You guys have already done kind of the vanguard of that. Sometimes I actually think maybe I wish that we had mandated that happen, but everything takes 2 years anyway. So we would be right where you are now. So, and I mean that the whole issue that we're talking about came about because of excessive spending. If we could actually quantify what we're going to be saving by going to this consolidated the CISA or BOCES, I think it would take away a lot of the pain. But I want to personally let your people know that we don't have the crosshairs. We understand that you can't do it without it. I mean, the schoolhouses are where they are, and the population centers are where they are too. So, we just need to look at it in a different light.
Yes.
So we've spoke, and I have in our district, we have at least 3, if not 4 schools that are now facing the same dilemma that Lincoln did. Lincoln did a very good job. They became their own district and are making it work. And we've sat and talked about this quite a bit, that someday it may not work. And when it doesn't work, that's when you'll address it. Beeman Academy, same thing there. They're having to address, but it should be a community-based thing. We can't go off our feelings when financially we just cannot continue to keep schools open. That's when the reality comes in, and then getting the community to go. And Beeman's kind of having that happen now. It's like, what are we going to do as a community? Because we love our rural school. We do not want it to close, just like Ripton. At the end of the day, Ripton decided with no push from the school board that we just cannot afford the economics of it. And that's what will drive, I believe, all this. This committee, both committees are not looking to close any schools. Everybody realizes with the mandate that, or the act, that is going to be fallout from it. And, you know, we as committees are not looking to go, your school's got to close. And that's, I agree with my fellow senators, it's that we don't even talk about it, but it just gets in the conversation. Well, it's going to happen. And that's right, but we want communities to be involved. And as all from our principals to our superintendents, when it doesn't, when nobody wants to make that decision, it's probably going to have to come up from the state. And I'm hoping that the local community makes it so that it's not what they wanted to do, but they realized it's what they had.
Well, I just wanted to offer, and so one of our, we have 5 members of the steering committee, and one of the members, they're currently having those really hard conversations, not because anybody made them happen, because they're aware, they care, and I think we've always felt that, and provided another testimony, that it's really more about involving the community early, having an orderly process about sustainability going forward. When enrollment is and projections, you know, you can kind of see them heading in a direction where you just aren't getting the new kindergartners coming in, you're getting so few. And I think that's where, again, it's about partnering, about wanting to be in that conversation with the state. What are the best ways to use this building? Maybe if we can't continue having the school there, but not have it imposed. I think that's really the key that we certainly didn't, we weren't really looking to be imposed. So I hope that's taken at face value. It was really just expressing what we're hearing. And obviously want to move out of that mode. Totally. We don't want to be in the mode of feeling beleaguered for our members.
Marlborough is the school June was talking about, and since last June, when we said you should have these conversations, they've had consistent community conversations. They will vote in March to close this school. So this is happening. I can give you a different example. Peacham is a small school where I live, which has 60 plus students, and it has steady enrollment. One of the reasons it has steady enrollment is after Act 46, a community group came together, formed the Peacham Children's Center, and the Peacham Children's Center is a nonprofit which hires a provider and has opened a childcare center for 0 to 3-year-olds in the basement of the church. This children's center is attractive for families, attractive so much so that it has a waiting list. Many people coming from far away to bring their baby for childcare. It's acted as a feeder into our preschool program and our elementary school program, and our enrollment has stayed similar. Our enrollment's not going gangbusters, but it's also not declining. And we thought about it as a community sustainability issue. And there is an organization, the Council for Rural Development, that helps communities look at sustainability and look at their future. And we believe schools that feel threatened because they understand this issue would benefit from that kind of process to help them plan for sustainability. Because we know, research shows us that when a community loses a school, depopulation follows, declining home values follow, and young families don't move to that town. They move to the town with school. So it has implications beyond schooling for families. That's really key. We also believe the community should vote for this reason. Communities will vote yes to close. Marlborough may. Holland voted yes to close when they are assured that all the issues for their children are taken care of. The reason why you have a very controversial situation between Montpelier and Roxbury, was Montpelier and Roxbury merged during Act 46. And they were very different in size. Montpelier, a large town, Roxbury, tiny. They weren't contiguous. There's another town in between. It's a long way to get from here to there. They had a small school there, which was reduced to grades pre-K 4. When the budget didn't pass in 24, that school was closed. There was one vote from the 2 Roxbury reps on a board of 10 or 12. Roxbury did not have a vote at the time. They had no voice in the decision. Their school was closed for monetary reasons, not for academic or other reasons. And because of the difficulty in getting bus drivers, etc., there's children are now on the bus for 2 hours and 20 minutes a day. They have a long ride in the morning or a long ride in the afternoon, and vice versa, a shorter ride the other end. So it's not 2.5 hours divided by 2, but it's split. It's a considerable amount of time. And there's a large percentage of families in Roxbury who homeschool now because they don't want their children on the bus. We feel if the community votes, they'll have made sure that all those things are taken care of before they'll say yes. And all those things should be taken care of in the best interest of children before they say yes. There's a reason they want to make sure their children are taken care of. The other issue in Roxbury is they now have an empty building. That empty building isn't in the school budget anymore, but it's $100,000 to maintain that building empty because there's no one in it. And they have to maintain it because what might happen if they don't take care of it, it's an asset in the town. But they're a rural town. Unlike, in towns and bigger towns, there isn't another, getting people to use that building effectively and pay for it is hard. There's plenty of volunteer groups who use it for meetings and whatnot, but to rent out that space isn't easy in a rural place. So you have those issues that come to play for rural towns with school closures, and this adds to people's worries.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for your question.
Yeah, thank you.
We appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, to fair act before you go, but it is possible that you recognize that we do not have you in the crosshairs at all because we don't like it's fair to do that, but then as a matter of the policy you see, it feels like you want. I think that's what.
Yeah, I
Yes.
mean, I think
I
it's
just want there's a way to separate those two things, and I.
absolutely.
So, okay. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very
Yeah, thanks. So we have, Jeff is here. I actually have a meeting at 4:30. Yeah, so.
It's okay.
Right up to 4:30. No.
Speaking by a challenge or?
No.
I'm sure you did.
I see this.
Oh,
Let's take it on. Here, away. That's like good afternoon. I will endeavor to do my best to get you out well in advance. So, for the record, Jeff Fannin, Executive Director for Vermont PA. I was asked, to speak to the maps that were, distributed last week. So I'll stick to those comments. I know you had a robust conversation, which is great.
Yeah.
I'm happy to answer.
It was kind of the call was the map, especially the hybrid. And then just anything you want to say about the notion of maps.
Got it. I'll do my best. And if I miss it and you want some more, I'm around.
Yeah.
Obviously. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to this. I haven't yet listened to the Secretary's comments last week. I've only looked at the document. So if I step in it, it's because of that permission on my part. In short, 3 maps, the VSBA region map, regional high school map, and combined or the hybrid map. They initially raised more questions than they answer. I believe all 3 proposed map will force will force the merger of SDs and SUs into very large districts. Although that isn't quite fairly clear to me, but I think they are forced. It's a forced merger. I don't think it's voluntary. I guess what I'm saying. The size of these new districts, no matter the map adopted, is too large, and I think it's out of sync with Vermont's community values. This may work in other states where there's existing county government system or other larger government system structures that are already baked into the state CNA. But that just is not the case here in Vermont. The size, therefore, is too large. Moreover, I've seen no evidence that the districts that are this size will improve student outcomes, which I believe is the purpose of educating students. Instead of these too large for Vermont maps, we remain supportive. Instead of these too large for Vermont maps, we remain supportive of the redistricting task forces call for a reasonable approach to forming local public school districts. The task force called for incentives to encourage schools to merge, and we support this approach. In addition, its voluntary mergers, the task force recommends 5 CSOs, or public education service areas, that are similar to the BOCES that 40 states already have in place. And finally, the task force, as does the administration, I think, recommends larger comprehensive regional high schools that would be voluntarily created by newly merged school districts. And of course, any of these new schools that are necessary to accommodate larger number of students, including a regional high school, would need to be accompanied by a restarted state aid for school construction funding program. You may, or I served a couple of years ago on the school construction task force. I forget who was on that with me. We have today we have a $6 to $9 billion school construction need. And that was 2-3 years ago. So I'm guessing it's gone up. We have the second oldest school stock in the nation. So it's not surprising that we have a lot of need for school construction. So if you're going to incent behavior around merging, we think, to your question earlier, we believe that school aid for school construction necessarily needs to be accompanied by these mergers. You just can't do it without it in large measure. It just can't happen. So state aid is critical. Additionally, any education transformation, these are reasonable timelines. The task force addressed that. We agree with that. You can't, these are big issues affecting a lot of kids, a lot of communities, and they don't happen with the flip of the switch. Unintended consequences that happen. I don't know what they are, but they do happen. You know that. These are complex systems, and we should take a do no harm approach, because behind all these maps are people and students, and we shouldn't forget that fact. So in essence, we think the task force did a nice job in reasonably looking at the facts, the evidence they heard, and went with voluntary, with incentives, significant incentives. And I think that will, and just by the way, those incentives, we're going to have to do it anyway. So we're suggesting that take what's already a need for the state and direct it into policy changes. So Jay mentioned earlier, Rhode Island and their school state aid for construction. They had a modest amount of state aid at sort of the baseline. And then if the school district then took actions, if it took actions to do things that the state thought was necessary, they got bonus points. So they got slightly more aid for this or that, depending on what the bonus was. There's a whole system set up. We think that was a great approach because, again, you have this need. We have just desires on the part of the state to give communities an incentive to doing what we want them to do, carrot, and that is state aid for school construction. So we think that's a good approach. The maps here don't talk about that. I think, again, it's one of those huge questions for me. What do they want to do with that need that's not addressed here? But if these big maps are created, first of all, it's just not, as Jay talked about earlier, these folks in these big areas have not worked together previously. And it's just something out of the DNA of those large communities.
And then again, you're gonna have to build schools, a lot of more reading. And so, why not do it in a way that works for Vermont and addresses the unmet need?
Why would you have to build schools within that model?
It's our belief that, well, I don't know that you do. That's a fair question. But it seems like you're not gonna want to operate schools as you know it, and that those schools are falling down. North Country, for example, North Country High School. It's at its end life, as I understand it. Last year, they put $7 or $8 million into PCB remediation. And a school that by, I guess, engineers or some school construction experts was at the end of its life. And I grew up in a family where we were told repeatedly, I'll say by my father, this mantra was, we're too poor to be cheap. And what he meant by that, he said it loudly at times, buy good things, take care of it, and don't waste money on things that are not valuable. And if these schools that in these large areas are already at end life, which I believe is the case in many of them, then why should we throw good money after bad? We are too poor to be cheap, and we're too smart to do that. So I think that's why I think the reality is, you're right, it doesn't require that, but it necessarily might.
Yeah, what you're saying is probably true with or without the maps.
Absolutely.
Some of the maps, though, yeah, it's just, okay.
So if you want people to do things, and I think you do, they need to do other things, marry the two together with vendors that they need. We used to have state aid for school construction system prior to 2007. That went away. It was supposed to be a temporary recession in 2007, which would be a temporary measure. And here we are a bunch of years later, and it's still going on.
Question for you is, what do we do to drive down? So I ask this question not as somebody who actually wants to drive down, because I understand the needs of schools. We actually picked up a lot about that as we went around and did our rest, and we know it from our own districts. But at the same time, we're faced with a situation where the rate of increase right now is just, I think, by any measure, is not sustainable. And we are trying, the legislature every year dumps money in to buy down the rate. And the money, just in my view, will not be there again after this year, to the extent we can do it at all. So what do we do for next year?
So here's what I would say. School budgets are being discussed, and soon, very soon.
Actually, at the year after.
No, I know, but they're voting on those year after budgets, I think, right now. And those are being finalized as we speak. It's my understanding from my colleagues who work all around the state that there are school boards that are doing the work they think necessary to educate their students and reduce their costs as much as they possibly can in a fair and balanced way that works for their community, works for their students, and serves the kids they need to serve. And the RIFs, there were 400 or so last year. If one employer in the state laid off 400 people, we would have a SWAT team from the Department of Labor going in, helping them. And that happened around the state, small numbers here and there, and some large places. It was large numbers here and there. CVU was 84. I guess Jay said I heard for over 2 years, right? I don't know. I heard 88, but either way, over 80 people in the last few years at CVU have been ripped positions. And I don't know if they'll repeat that this year, the number, but it does happen every day. So I think the answer to your question, Senator, is school boards are managing right now to try to lower the costs. What I would also add is, we talked earlier, just a few minutes ago, you talked about Montpelier Roxbury. My understanding that they were projecting a 2% education spending growth. I don't know if it was per pupil or overall, a 2% growth. Is their proposal. And that was leading to a 12% property tax increase. I heard on the radio last week that Twinfield, which consists of Plainfield and Marshfield, they're two communities that are similar demographically, I think. One, it was, again, a 2 or 3% modest education spending increase. followed by one of the school districts had a more than 20% property tax increase, and another had an equally similar number decrease. There is no explanation for that, in my humble opinion. I understand that there is, and my understanding is in Montpelier and Roxbury, there was a long discussion about that, and it left people more confused. The system is very confusing right now. It's been layer upon layer upon layer upon for 20 years. And I think it shouldn't be that you need a PhD in math to determine your property tax if your budget is going up 2%. Nowhere does that mean a 2% budget increase should not mean a 28% property tax increase. I don't get that math.
That's as you go, that's the system. And so we're trying to figure out what to do about the issue that you're raising. You're raising exactly the issue.
Yes.
And I guess.
Right. We last November, 2024, we believe that the income tax is a better way to go. It's ability to pay, and it eliminates, it abolishes the residential property tax. Right now, for non-residential property tax, we have a fixed rate, and that's understandable. But if you're a resident, you pay a variable, and that is not understandable by anybody. And again, I don't think you should have a PhD in math to understand the property tax system. And by the way, the property tax overall is an antiquated system. It's based on a 250-year-old notion that one's ability to pay is based on the property wealth. And that's simply not the case today. I think we owe to our citizens to update that antiquated system.
To that point, have you had any requests to testify for the Senate Finance Committee, or would it be Ways and Means, the Health side, to talk about how to support education funding, whether it's property tax versus income tax? I was wondering if there's anybody else.
I've talked about it. I know that other people have talked about it. I know that there are challenges with the income tax.
But I mean, like this session,
Yeah.
Have they reached out to say, hey, we're going to have a conversation about this, or are we all just kind of talking to each other about, other concepts?
I don't know, not yet. Although I have been in Senate Finance earlier, they talked about the education cap that was being discussed, the variable cap.
But not the specific.
It came up during the conversation. So yes, and maybe not directly, but yes, it's come up in talking about the cap.
What did you say about the cap?
I wish I had it with me, but we don't think the caps work. In the last, been around the building for a few years, and the last two times that we had caps, they were repealed within a year before they went into effect, because they have unintended consequences. If my school district has a sudden emerging need or other unrelated, the cap it's not forgiven. And schools understood that. It's driven by the notion that schools are spending unnecessarily, and I don't think there's a school out there that is. I don't think there's deciding to spend frivolously. And so when you have a cap, and they have problems or issues they need to address, it's unforgiving, and it makes for really bad consequences for those schools, communities, and students. So we spoke out against them again this last week. I did as well. And the last two caps, as I said, both repealed before they went into effect, because school boards, communities did not like the way they were having their.
More questions? Any questions, anybody? So, a helpful day overall, in its entirety, not overall, in its entirety. So, thank you for coming in. Yeah.
Plenty of time before 30.
So, yeah. So with that, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thanks.